Hey everybody, it's David Waters from the Gators Breakdown Podcast. Thanks for joining us here. Look, go do something new here. Gators Breakdown Plus. What I'll do is I'll take that Periscope and I'll turn it into a podcast, and it'll be called Gators Breakdown Plus. So this is something new. We're going to try it and see how it goes. You guys requested that I turn it into an audio version, so it'll be uploaded to all the platforms: iTunes, YouTube, Google Play, SoundCloud, all that good stuff. So thanks for checking it out, and go Gators. Get things going soon. Just with the holidays, kind of hard to get Bill and Will and I together for a podcast. So spend some time with family during the holidays. So glad you guys were still interested in us doing a Gators breakdown. I know I put out a poll yesterday to kind of see if we were going to do a year-end review type of show. But like I said, around the holidays and got some family time. I have some time off of work, so going to spend some time with the family and just do a little short, what we kind of do on Periscope now, kind of Gators Breakdown Plus. If you kind of haven't noticed on the feed for SoundCloud, iTunes, or whatever, we'll take these Periscopes, break it down into a podcast form for you guys. So that's kind of why it's a little different right now. We're gonna, with the season slowing down and the off season and all recruiting kind of taking over right now, we don't no need for us to really do 3 shows a week like we were doing. But we are going to fill it in with these Gator Breakdowns Plus. Kind of the easy way to go about it with these Periscopes and turn it into a podcast. So glad you guys are interested in still us doing it this way. Don't get me wrong. We'll still be doing Will, and I will still be doing at least 1 show a week with just me and Will, or me or Bill, and all 3 of us. We'll kind of see how it goes, but right now that's how we're going to do things, especially around the holidays. So thanks, guys, for joining us on Gators Breakdown. It's been a really great year, 2017. Bigger things are coming in 2018, so stay tuned, keep your ears open out there, keep your eyes open. Some things are coming our way with Gators Breakdown. So, of course, Will just launched readandreaction.com. You can read his stuff there. He's left SEC country. He started his own venture. Some big risks there, but things are going good for Will. So thanks you guys for helping him out on that podcast and or that website. Hopefully everything is going good for Will there. I believe it is. The numbers are really good. He's been sharing with us, and he's given a Gators Breakdown tab there as well to kind of help Gators Breakdown since he's on the show. And I brought Bill along in 2017 around February signing day last year. So Bill's been with Gators Breakdown for almost a year. So like I said, 2017 was a great year. We're going to review just a little bit and what happened with 2017 with the Gators. I know it was a different year for Florida with a coaching change. Hope you guys can hear me trying out the new AirPods here. So hopefully, everything still sounds good along that way. But yeah, as I mentioned, year in review, kind of, if you go back a year ago, look, Florida was preparing for a bowl game going against Iowa in the Outback Bowl. Florida wins that game convincingly against Iowa, and look, we think that's setting up a big 2017 for the Gators. You want to win a bowl game, see if that translates into some positive momentum for the program, and it seemed like it was. Florida goes into spring. Felipe Franks is quarterback. Fans are eager to see Felipe Franks taking over, and had an okay spring game. And it was enough to get fans excited for something new. It was a quarterback that McElwain and Nussmeier had recruited, and we just a lot of people wanted to see what he could do. Some people weren't impressed with what he did in the spring. Some people were, but we'll fast forward and we got even more excited after spring when the quarterback recruiting in 2017 really started to ramp up. The secret visits of Justin Fields on campus at Florida and all that good stuff. I remember a picture was sent to me. It was during baseball season, and there's a golf cart with Justin Fields' name on it. And it's like, hey, should this be happening? What's going on here? And so I had to ask where the picture come from, and I sent it to some sources that I know down in Gainesville. And they're like, oh, that's not supposed to get out. This is supposed to be secret. So Justin Fields was really supposed to have all these secret visits to Florida and to Auburn and all these other campuses But Florida could never really get a beat on him. He had some interest in Florida, but also in all the other programs. And then we know eventually came along Matt Corral in the summertime, and getting him committed from McElwain and Nussmeier, a big-time 5-star, 4-star quarterback that McElwain and Nussmeier were finally able to get. And we thought, hey, look, everything is going great. Everything in Gator Nation looks good. Had a really good spring. You can see that McElwain is targeting big-time quarterbacks. And from there, there was also news of Malik Zaire finally being able to come in as a grad transfer from Notre Dame, and we broke down on Gators Breakdown a good bit of why I wasn't too excited about Malik Zaire coming in, and not necessarily. It was a little bit of a knock on his ability. From what he didn't do great things at Notre Dame, didn't really have a chance to do great things at Notre Dame after he got injured. But I did not see him as a fit for the McElwain-Nussmeier offense. They refused to run quarterbacks. Nussmeier had a history of refusing to run quarterbacks with Devin Gardner back in Michigan. Treon Harris, his previous stint at Florida with Nussmeier as offensive coordinator, his first season there. It was. I didn't believe Malik Zaire would do much at Florida, just because more of the coaching staff more than it was him. So, look. That's kind of what it did. Summer rolls along. I mentioned the quarterback recruiting. You were still recruiting Justin Fields. You were still recruiting Matt Corral. Late July, Friday Night Lights comes about. Matt Corral commits. A flood of other commitments come in because they finally had a linchpin quarterback that they could count on. Everything is going great in Gator Nation. You had coaches jumping in pools, excited for recruiting. You had Jacob Copeland and Jamar Chase committing to Florida. You had the running back, Damian Pierce, who was coming in. Oh, yeah, I forgot about I'm glad you guys were there. Stidham. The big swing and miss with Jarrett Stidham. Got in late. Look, we can sit here, we could talk ad nauseum about how just inept the previous coaching staff was at recruiting and getting in so late on Jarrett Stidham when they probably honestly had a good chance of getting him if they really wanted him early, but they had their chance. They just, for whatever reason, just waited. They got in late. Auburn had a big head start. Florida didn't really start talking to him until December, about a year ago. Right before the SEC championship game, about trying to get Jarrett Stidham in. It was too little, too late. Too much work to do to make up. But that's just another example of what we'll get into of what happened. But as I mentioned, recruiting took off during the summer after Friday Night Lights, mainly Matt Corral being the linchpin there, and everything was setting up for a big season. Recruiting was going well. He had Felipe Franks, the starting quarterback. Everyone was kind of ready to see what a McElwain-Nussmeier quarterback could do. Then the bad news kind of started around the same time as that. Marcel Harris gets injured, a big blow to the defense that was replacing defensive coordinator Jeff Collins, who went on to Temple to be head coach. And then it all kind of came, the beginning of the end come in August. The credit card scandal. I remember it was a Saturday morning, and I kind of waking up, and I remember I had to go to a birthday party of a family member and seeing all this stuff that I had so many direct messages on Twitter and text messages and everything coming about with this credit card scandal, and how players were using student financial aid cards to make purchases and stuff they shouldn't buy, and all the credit card stealing identities of other people and paying rent for whatever it was for their hotels, and buying snacks and all that stuff. And hey, look, that was kind of the beginning of the end. If you want to go back and do revisionist history for Jim McElwain, it made it a point to where Antonio Callaway was the big name there, who had also been in previous trouble just a couple months earlier to do with a traffic stop, and found marijuana on him. You also had Jordan Scarlett, who was the linchpin running back, who would have been the starting running back for the team, who had really carried the team late last year. We all remember the LSU game when Florida went to Baton Rouge and beat LSU with Jordan Scarlett's really strong running in the second half, and big things were expected from him coming into the season. But those were the two big names there, among others, that were supposed to be contributors to this team. It was supposed to be those players that were going to help this offense take off. With a new quarterback in Felipe Franks, you're going to have your big-time receiver in Antonio Callaway to help him out. You're going to have an experienced Tyree Cleveland to be on the other side to help him out, and Jordan Scarlett being that running back. But it just wasn't meant to be. As I said, it was the beginning of the end. The season starts a few weeks later. You go to Dallas, and us fans are so excited about this Michigan game. It's the game we've been waiting for. Florida doesn't open up with big-time opponents a lot. We get the cupcakes. We get the gimme games the first game of the season, and Florida gets to go to Dallas, and it's a Michigan team that's replacing a ton of starters. And Jim Harbaugh and Jim McElwain's in their third years, and let's see where both programs are standing on. And it wasn't as close as the score was to be indicated. You had two defensive pick six touchdowns that made the game a lot closer than it should have been. The offense never took off. You had the offensive line that was getting blown up after play after play. This Michigan defensive line that had recruited so well, and then you had an offensive line that Jim McElwain really yeah. Man cave stuff still, yeah. There you go, Tony. You had this offensive line that Jim McElwain praised during the preseason and SEC media days, and it was even a contention of some media, the SEC media. We had Cole Kubelik on Gators Breakdown before the season started, and he was really high on this offensive line and how the experience that they gained in 2016, how it would translate to 2017, and how T.J. McCoy at center was going to be this centerpiece. And you had Juwan Taylor at right tackle. But and my big worry, and he didn't do bad, but he didn't do this great either, was Ivy moving to left tackle. And as much as yes, he played tackle in high school, but it was tackle in a run-heavy offense, very, very run-heavy offense. He didn't have a lot of experience. He was a five-star recruit based off of a run-heavy offense, and he played guard his first 2 years in Gainesville, and now was shifted out to left tackle. And he didn't do terrible. He wasn't terrible by any means, but he wasn't this big, great five-star living up to a five-star billing at left tackle either. So, it was. I see a lot of you guys saying how Mac was a snake oil salesman for this offensive line, and it was. I wasn't ready to go over the edge about the offensive line. I did think they would be better. I would think it would be a point they could rely on. And you know what? As the season played on, they weren't as bad as it was that Michigan game. Now they were playing a much more talented team in Michigan, and it really showed just still how far Florida was under Jim McElwain of the big time programs. Now Michigan wasn't a big time program. Historically they are. And yeah, Brett Hagee, they didn't lie about him. Absolutely lived up to the billing there. Got hurt later on in the year, but was able to play through most of that. But it was a big stage. You were one of the two marquee games the first week of the season, and then to basically show again that you got manhandled, and you didn't have. Yes, granted, you didn't have Jordan Scarlett as a running back to lean on, but I don't think it would have mattered too much with the way that offensive line was built up to be and did not show up as it was. We knew the talent Malik Davis was going to be later on in the season. We saw that, but he had one carry against Michigan for 8 yards, but we never saw him again. Kadarius Toney, who we heard about all preseason of how electric playmaker he was, didn't get the ball out against Michigan, and we finally, slowly as the season went on, got to see how much of a playmaker he was. We didn't get to see any of it against Michigan. So that game was just a microcosm of Jim McElwain's career. And later on in the season, just kind of how everything fell apart. I see the question about if Scarlett is coming back. Still don't know about that. There's some things out there he's kind of maybe working out. on campus and still working out at the university. We'll kind of see how that goes. I haven't been able to confirm that. There's basically this new technology Florida's getting for being able to in strength and conditioning area, and apparently he's supposed to be among that to be testing that out of. But we'll see. I don't necessarily think that means anything if he's going to be staying or not. He's not a guy that has been in I know he's been suspended in the past. He's not like a troublemaker type of guy. But for as far as he is into his career, much like Antonio Callaway, it's not going to hurt my feelings at all if he just moves on. Would I like to see his talent back in the backfield and under a Dan Mullen style of offense? Absolutely. But it's not going to hurt my feelings at all. I see a lot of jokes on here on the Periscope. Third long play action. Yeah, everybody kind of knows that. Was my big bugaboo as the season went on. Didn't really show up until McElwain got fired, though. I don't really know whatever Doug Nussmeier was thinking. That was. I didn't notice it as much before the firing as I did after the firing. Starting the Georgia game, I don't know why in the world we got the third and long play action so much. So looking at that, Michigan, devastating loss, definitely for Jim McElwain, and going back into post game and kind of how he called out the players. I know Will Miles had spoken to that of how he didn't really take any of the blame upon his own shoulders. It was more about the guys not being tough enough, and that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And look, as I said, that Michigan, the credit card scandal and the Michigan game kind of together was the beginning of the end for Jim McElwain. Little did we know at the time. But it kind of was the beginning of the end for Jim McElwain. Hey, look, but then we still had one exciting moment of the season. Oh, well, man, I did. Thanks, Tyler. I did skip the shark photo. Most of it was because when it was going on, I was really just tired of hearing about it. But going back and looking at it, that was another thing where you could kind of go back, and as I kind of said, the beginning of the end for Jim McElwain was the credit card scandal and the Michigan game. But I won't say that was the beginning of the end, the shark photo, but it kind of was one of the parts where you could say the job was too big for Jim McElwain. The pressure of the Florida job, of how he acted and reacted to the photo, very defensive. And at that time, I kind of defended the way he was handling it at first. At the very first, he kind of did want to shove it off and kind of move on, and it was brought up even more. But when it was brought up again, I think there was a local media session that they were able to have at a function, and he really got defensive, and he let it know that it got to him. And once people knew that it got to him, that's when it was ramped up. That's when the social media barrage kind of happened, and the memes, and kept being asked about it, and you could tell he was irritated. And he the part about it was attacking his family, and he kind of maybe took that far. I didn't really see anywhere. I know his family probably had to deal with it, the photo itself, but I don't think anything was necessarily directed at them. Per se. We'll get into that later too, about kind of the whole family and threat and all that kind of stuff. That played a huge part in the decision of Jim McElwain. But then it kind of died down, and I knew going into SEC Media Days it was going to be brought up because the national media hadn't got a chance to talk to Jim McElwain about it yet. It was local media who'd only really got a chance, and SEC Media Days rolled around, and you had the shark photo, the shark photo being brought back up. So, that's just the pressure of the Florida job. And not every coach has to go through that, don't get me wrong, but it is, if that photo would have been Jim McElwain at Colorado State, you would have heard about it. It would have been back page news. It wouldn't have been front page news. It wouldn't have been shared on Twitter and Facebook and social media like it was. So being the head coach of Florida kind of brought that back kind of brought that back in a way to where it was ramped up more than it would have been anywhere else. So it lets you know how different this Florida job is, and I think was probably one of the first steps in putting the pressure on Jim McElwain in 2017. So. Also, I mentioned the Michigan game, how big of a debacle that was, and how we got something exciting. Look, I was in the stadium with the Tennessee game, and granted the season was going to kind of snowball a couple weeks after that, or a few weeks after that, as far as starting the losing streak was starting the LSU game. There was still an exciting time. We had the canceled game because of the hurricane. So Tennessee was only the second game of the season. You had them visiting the swamp. You had them trying to get, Florida needed revenge from last year of Tennessee ending the streak. That was ended in Knoxville the year before. CBS come to us almost another 3:30 game. We get the national televised audience, and we get the bomb at the end from Felipe Franks to Tyree Cleveland. And look, and I think I kind of speak for a lot of people where we hoped that was going to be the spark that led Felipe Franks to be in something special at quarterback for Florida. We hoped that was the spark. He didn't have a great game, of course, but you had a great fourth quarter from Florida. I think Brandon Powell scored a touchdown to bring it up, and then it wasn't a great fourth quarter. Florida was up. Tennessee kind of fought back a little bit, and then you had a late touchdown from Brandon Powell, I believe, that kind of. I can't remember the direct layout of that game, but do, of course, remember the end of it where the last play of the game you had a bomb from Franks to Tyree Cleveland, and we was hoping that was going to be the thing that took this Florida offense off. Florida's defense in that game started off very well, but then you had John Kelly, who I was really afraid of in that Tennessee offense, being able to be a cog in breaking tackles and being a threat in the passing game. That's kind of where we knew that was going to be. Where did I get the chair? Actually, it was a Christmas present for my wife. We actually just put it together. So it's what we're going to see with Felipe Franks and Tyree Cleveland and that bomb. It was going to be a spark. It was going to be where Felipe Franks was going to be that quarterback where Jim McElwain and Doug Nussmeier could hang their hat on. But that wasn't to be the case. We know Florida went to Kentucky. Hey, kept the streak. Two things about the season that we can still hang our hats on and be happy about. Not a lot. Getting rid of Mac was part of it. Was a great part of it. But he also gave us another bomb against Tennessee to do that, and then kept the streak against Kentucky. Felipe Franks struggled in that game. Luke Del Rio come in. You had a offense that was struggling, but then an offense where Luke Del Rio come in and looked more calm. You could see the checks that were being made before. And I actually caught that game a couple of days ago, actually, when I was at work, and we had the SEC Network on, and you had Luke Del Rio come in and threw a pick on that first drive, and it was like, oh, here we go again. But then, he let it. We thought he would take over. He gets hurt against Vanderbilt, I do believe, but Florida breaks away in that game. But then, kind of everything started falling apart. You lose to LSU. You lose to Texas A&M. You had a bye week. And death threats. And at the time, I didn't like the whole death threats, but never did I think it would lead to Jim McElwain being fired. Thought something would happen. As I said, I didn't think it would go that far. But then you had the week. That was the week after the bye week. That was the Monday leading up to the Georgia game. Then it was kind of pressed. And then you had the Wednesday SEC coaches teleconference. It was brought up then. But then I got I started, some sources started messaging me on Thursday. And they say, look, death threat thing got a little bit bigger, more than it should have. Jim McElwain can't prove anything. At the time earlier in the week, we knew he wouldn't share much more information with the university, kind of standoffish about it. And I was told that the university is going to try and get out of it, and McElwain would be done over the weekend against Georgia, no matter win or lose against Georgia, that he would be done. Then Saturday morning rolls around before the Florida-Georgia game, and there's a lot of smoke starting to come out of, SEC Network had to respond to it. Tim Tebow and we had Laura Rutledge on our Gators Breakdown podcast a couple weeks ago, and she was saying they were sitting there talking about it and off air, and they were asking Tebow what should they do, and Tebow said, well, we should talk about it, we should run with it, and somebody with Tebow's stature, somebody with Tebow's knowledge of the Florida program, maybe he had heard something. And we had, like I said, I had heard the Thursday before that Jim McElwain was done with it, so I'm sure it started getting around a lot. And I see a lot of people asking if the death threat thing was orchestrated, and I don't know. It was. Yeah, and I mean, somebody else also with Strickland's response. Yeah, it wasn't going to turn out good once Strickland come out and really didn't defend McElwain and talking about how he was hiding, not willing to share the more info about that. And Tyler Rosie brings up a good point. Maybe he was looking for sympathy and it backfired. I think that probably had more to do with it than him actually, wanting to make it up as a way out. Don't get me wrong. Look, I think we mentioned this on the podcast a lot. Every coach to me, big time program gets death threats. A lot of players get death threats. That's no excuse. The fans shouldn't act that way at all. Enjoy the game, be a football fan, but don't take it that far. But I do think Jim McElwain probably took it a little bit too far. The reach on that was a little too far. If you're not going to bring specific examples, and if you're not going to bring specific examples where you fear for your life, then don't bring it up at all. And if you're not willing to dive more into it and tell the university and give them specific examples and look, you can't hide that if it's all that true. You're putting student athletes, if you believe those threats to be real enough where you came out publicly with it, which I'm assuming he did, he thought they were big enough to come out publicly with, then you have to tell the university, and just you can't put, if there was a certain student athlete that they targeted as a death threat, then the university needs to know so they can make sure that student athlete or student athletes in general are safe and are not put in harm's way by you hiding a death threat, if that was so real that you can't hide that and then expect to not deluge more information about how that goes. Sorry, guys, I know it's kind of fumbling over my words here, but I'm trying to read what you guys are sending us to as I'm reading about it. So yeah, that situation was definitely, as I mentioned, the beginning of the end was the credit card scandal in the Michigan game. This right here was the explosion. This was kaboom, boom goes to dynamite, as the popular phrase from years ago said. That was the beginning of the end. And the Georgia game was a blowout. And then we know the day of, the next day. And look, the university even had to put out a statement that Saturday, the Florida-Georgia game. Look, nothing's happening, blah, blah, blah. We defend Coach Mack for the Florida-Georgia game today, blah, blah. But we know Sunday coming along, the day after, it couldn't be hidden too much more. Sunday morning, it really started leaking out that something was going to happen, and we had a press conference Sunday afternoon, day after Florida-Georgia game, that Jim McElwain was going to be let go. It was a quote mutual parting of ways, pretty much, I think at that point, Jim McElwain wanted out. I think Florida wanted out. This kind of goes all the way back to McElwain's first year. I've even heard Jeremy Foley had buyer's remorse not too long after the season started. We always knew about McElwain's public public way of going about, putting negative connotations out there that the facilities weren't up to standards, and kind of complaining about the lack of the lack of support that he would have from the higher ups, and how it would need to get better. And he came in, and the indoor practice facility that started under Will Muschamp of getting that done, but Jim McElwain came in and kind of scrapped that and made it a bigger, nicer indoor facility. So McElwain can get credit for that. But Florida knew once Jeremy Foley left and Scott Strickland come in that Florida already knew that the facilities needed to be upgraded. There was no need in keep attacking the administration about the lack of facilities. Florida knew that. There were plans being made to get the facilities in order for Florida, but McElwain just kept rubbing and kept ribbing, and yes, we got it. We knew that, and we knew that was being used against Florida in recruiting and all that, but it was being taken care of. You could have dropped it at any moment, but it continued after the bowl game against Iowa and all that stuff. So it was just a bad marriage from the start. If you go back and ask some people about it, as I said, Jeremy Foley had buyer's remorse in year one, even though Florida was winning year one. About midway through that season, I think things started going south of how Jim McElwain. A lot of people are saying he was standoffish as well, compared, in comparing to other head coaches of other sports. Didn't really take place in a lot of functions for the university. I thought he was better. Didn't really want to be around the university. So, you know what? Jim McElwain wanted out. Florida wanted out. It was an ugly way of it happening, but it happened. And I think Florida's better for it. We know the way the rest of the season played out. No really need to dive into that. That was so negative. But now we have the death threats. Jim McElwain's fired, and Florida makes a great hire in Dan Mullen. We all remember the coaching search of how it was close to a done deal of Chip Kelly coming to Florida. There was mutual interest there. Was he coming to Florida? Was there a contract signed? Was there an agreement in somehow, some way? We know Florida went up there and met with him. And I always put to myself, I put it out there that there's no way you go up there and not offer a contract or an agreement of some sorts. I believe Florida at one point may have thought they had an agreement with Chip Kelly. I think he was probably their first choice. That didn't work out. But then you had Scott Frost, Dan Mullen, Willie Taggart, all those names that really came out. The Mullen's name really died down once he did it. Once the Chip Kelly name started coming out, Dan Mullen's name died down a little bit. He was definitely one of the names that was brought up when Jim McElwain was first fired. You had articles and our podcast and other shows out there, and NCC Network, of course, throwing out who should be the next Florida head coach, and Dan Mullen's name was at or near the top, and he was definitely near the top when on the Our Gators Breakdown podcast after the fact. He was also in the Tennessee circles. Tyler brought up, and look, he would probably be the Tennessee head coach right now had Florida not stepped in the week of Thanksgiving, the FSU game as well. Florida came in. Tennessee had already talked to him at that point, and then Florida swooped in. Florida was the job he wanted. Of course, he knew the job was open. Jim McElwain had been fired. He had a relationship with Scott Strickland. A lot of people kind of blew that up, that they didn't really get along. Some people had blown up the fact that Dan Mullen would not be a fit at Florida because his wife wasn't happy before. He didn't really get along with the higher-ups at Florida at that time. And that really looks to be, if you go back and look at it, kind of been overblown a little bit. And Dan Mullen was hired after, the Saturday of the FSU game. We woke up and we turned on College Game Day. Chip Kelly's named head coach of UCLA. And I went to bed that Saturday night hearing, I wasn't hearing Dan Mullen's name. As I said, his name died down once the Chip Kelly news kind of started out. And then, look, there's been interviews with Dan Mullen and Scott Strickland that says they didn't talk until the week of the FSU game. They did not talk until either the Thursday or Friday before the FSU game. And that would have been, I think it was Friday, because Strickland contacted Mullen after the Egg Bowl, after the Mississippi State Egg Bowl game on Thursday, Thanksgiving night. Strickland contacted Mullen. Hey, look, we're interested. Let's talk some more. We have a game against FSU tomorrow, but I'm going to call you after that game and see what happens. So Mullen's got a day to think about it. Florida plays Florida State. He gets a call from Scott Strickland. Boom. They agree to a deal. Dan Mullen will be the next head coach of the Florida Gators. And look, it started with a bang. Gator Nation was pretty excited. He gets off the plane in Gainesville with the biggest smile on his face, Gator chomping, shaking people's hands throughout the airport. Much different from when Jim McElwain came in. And look, they had Florida, and Florida did a really good job also. The media team there following Dan Mullen's day. You could go through, you could watch all the from when he landed and did the chomp out of the door. Got into a car, was talking to the photographer that was in the back seat. Hey, look, I'm excited. I'm ready to get there. I'm ready to get to the swamp. I'm ready to get this thing going. Then he has his opening press conference, and his family's chomping throughout the airport. They have pictures being taken. Dan Mullen is showing off of his national championship ring in the airport. You could just genuinely feel it as this. As the media is sharing videos right away. I remember I was watching the Periscope of when he landed, and they were following through the airport, and he could not wipe the smile off of his face. And he was talking about, hey, look, I haven't worn this national championship ring since I left Gainesville. And he was showing it off, getting pictures taken. It was just. You could tell he wanted to be here. He wanted to be a Gator. He wanted to be in Gainesville. He's ready to turn this program around. He's ready to rekindle the feeling of Gator Nation when he was offensive coordinator and led this Gator offense. And he gets his opening press conference, and he mentions Steve Spurrier by name. There was a lot of talk out there that Steve Spurrier didn't want Dan Mullen. They wanted one of the other coaches was backing Charlie Strong and all that, and that seems to be overblown as well. Tyler brings up, he answered the tough questions. Of course, the question was brought up about his wife and her comments about not liking Gainesville and all that. He goes, look, it is what it was at the time. He didn't shy away from that question. He answered it, and then answered the question about the offense and turning it around. And quarterback and developing a quarterback. He didn't say his dog could play quarterback, so that was a good start. But no, more serious. He just didn't shy away. He had a confidence, much like McElwain did, that he could get the job done. But it was a different type of confidence. It was one of confidence and happy. And being able to take about what it would take to get this Florida program turned around, starting with quarterback, starting with getting the attitude. It was different from also the fact Scott Strickland mentioned it, Dan Mullen mentioned it, and we've heard the stories come out since Jim McElwain's firing of strength and conditioning would be a big part. Strength and conditioning is going to be one of the difference makers in turning this Florida program about. And I've heard it from multiple sources about how bad. I've talked to a high school coach that I work with who has been to Gainesville on visits, and they go and they tour the campus and just talk about how dirty the weight room was, how messy it was. There was towels thrown everywhere. Nothing was put back together. And they said how they would go on other visits. He would take his high school players on other visits and just see how they fix up this stuff and how the weight room was a display and not the messy mess it was in Gainesville. But look, Dan Mullen knows what it takes. Dan Mullen is coming from Mississippi State. And winning with 3 stars and JUCOs and developing quarterbacks and You had Dak Prescott in the Heisman conversation, had Mississippi State ranked number 1 in the nation in the very first college football poll that came out. Mississippi State was ranked number 1. He's doing that with much less talent than he would get at Florida. He's going to have 5 stars. He's going to have 4 stars. He's going to develop the other guys that need developing that are currently on the roster. I think we can see. I don't know how fast the turnaround will be. I know Will Miles had an article about just how his creativity alone will probably help this Florida team much more than what we've seen in the past. Dan Mullen. He knows what it takes by being in the SEC for years and being able to go head-to-head against Alabama, head-to-head against LSU, head-to-head against Auburn, being pretty competitive against those teams. Now, Alabama, of course, we know what happens there. Most teams don't beat that monster that's owning the SEC West. But he was competitive against LSU, Auburn, Texas A&M, teams that out-recruited him every year. Ole Miss, we know the sanctions they're in to get the recruits to Ole Miss that Dan Mullen couldn't get at Mississippi State. Ole Miss had to go out and cheat to do it. Mullen didn't go out and get popped for cheating and trying to get recruits to start Phil. He did it with his 3 stars and JUCOs and 2 stars. And, yes, and don't get me wrong, he had his 4 stars and his 5 stars. Jeffrey Simmons is the 5-star they have on the roster. But he built that roster up to be competitive in the SEC West. And look, if Mississippi State would have been the SEC East, they're probably playing in SEC championship games against Alabama and Auburn and LSU. So it is, you go back and look at it this year, had Alabama beat Bama, it took a late fourth quarter drive to take the lead against Mississippi State, and look, he had that team on the cusp of beating Alabama. They destroyed LSU a couple weeks before LSU come to the Swamp and defeated Florida. Look, that wasn't even a game; it was from the get go. Mississippi State just slaughtered LSU. And, it didn't look as good of a win because LSU turns around and loses to Troy as well against homecoming, but LSU turned out to be a pretty good team later on in the year. So, Dan Mullen knows what it takes. He knows the state of Florida. He knows the type of quarterbacks it takes to have success in the SEC, and the type of quarterbacks it takes to beat a team like Bama, and Auburn and LSU, A&M. Those teams are still going to recruit well. And look, he's going to be dealing with Georgia in the SEC East, much like the Alabama monster in the West. If Kirby Smart and Georgia doesn't slow down recruiting, like they've done in Kirby Smart's first 2 years. Look, Dan Mullen now is going to have a state talent base he can recruit to play against that. You still got to, and you guys know I'm a stars matter guy. You got to have the 4 stars and 5 stars. But if you get 4 stars and 5 stars that are comparable to what Georgia's getting, what's going to take over after that? It's going to take coaching. Coaching is going to take over after that. And we've seen Dan Mullen can be a good coach with 3 stars and 4 stars and sprinkle in a 5-star here and there. But you get these rosters equal. Coaching is what's going to take over after that. Development is what's going to take over after that. And we've seen he knows how to do that. So give him a year or so. Let him get his feet under it. And you guys know I've preached this on the past couple of podcasts. This early signing period has changed some things. And look, he's hit the transfer market very well. Trayvon Grimes, Van Jefferson at receiver. Hopefully those guys will be eligible for 2018. Went and got his big 4-star quarterback in Emory Jones, who's a fit for his system. Can he come in day one and be the quarterback Dan Mullen can build on? We'll see how that happens. But, we'll see. Do you give the keys to a freshman right away and let him build? I don't know how Dan Mullen views that. I don't know how much he'll view experience over. I mean, look, there's not a lot of experience in his system or a system any kind of similar to his on the Florida roster. Franks, no. Pro-style quarterback under Jim McElwain. Trask, Jake Allen, all these guys are drop back 3-step, 5-step, 7-step passers. And, not a spread, run type of offense. Now, can Felipe Franks get some development and be a quarterback that can rely on? We'll see. I don't know. A lot of people don't believe in it. But I'm not going to judge these quarterbacks that we've seen the last 3 years under the previous regime with no development, no lack of coaching. I'm not going to judge them too harshly on what they can be under Dan Mullen. Dan Mullen's proven time and time again he can develop a quarterback. We've seen Franks have a little bit of mobility. He's a big body type of quarterback that Dan Mullen likes. So we'll see. We'll see what happens in the spring. Emory Jones will be an early enrollee. So look, he gets even more months of preparation to be a starting quarterback as a freshman. And Mullen's offense, can he cater to a true freshman? I think so. It might be a even more run-heavy offense than what we eventually see under Dan Mullen. But you can't waste it, especially if you have Van Jefferson, Trayvon Grimes, Tyree Cleveland, Kadarius Toney lining up at receiver. You would hate to kind of waste those guys' talent. But you've got to bring along a quarterback. You can't throw him to the fire and expect him to throw for 400 yards, especially in Dan Mullen's offense. That's not what it's going to be anyway. It's going to be the perfect Dan Mullen offense game will be, of course, for every offense is about 500 yards. But if Dan Mullen can have 250 rushing and 250 passing, that's what he wants. And so you'll have hopefully Malik Davis coming back. He proved how big of a weapon he can be. Well, Michael Piron's coming back. We got Damian Pierce coming in as my favorite recruit on the offensive side of the ball coming in. Darius Lemons, who's shown that he can be. I think he's shown enough late in the season that he should have been being able to play more, especially when Malik Davis went down. Lemons should have been even more of a factor in the offense than he was. That's kind of some more looking at 2017 as going back. So you can look at the current roster and apply it to what we may see in the spring. I do believe it's going to be in year one. It is going to be a pretty run heavy offense, and in the passing game, it'll be big plays. It'll be run the ball with success, draw those defenders up. Wanting to stop the run, wanting to stop that quarterback run, spy a quarterback with a safety or a linebacker, boom, you hit them throw it over their heads for big plays. So, it's going to be, if I had to put a percentage on it, 70-30, maybe 65%, 70%, 65% passing, the rest or running, 70% running, 65% running, the rest passing, and then I think we'll go from there. If there's more passing than that, maybe some things aren't going as planned. Maybe Florida's having to fight back in some games late. But somebody else mentioned, I didn't get to catch who the name was, as it was, schedule sets up for it. Now, schedule sets up, I think, Charleston Southern's their first game of the year. Look, Dan Mullen's got some history with Charleston Southern, opening up with Charleston Southern. Mississippi State, I think, struggled with them opening up the season either this year or last year. I can't remember. Mississippi State did struggle with Charleston Southern in one of those years. But, you have the SEC East still. Georgia would be the overwhelming favorite when the media picks are coming in. But, look, Tennessee's got a brand-new head coach. They'll be working him in. Kentucky, hey, look. They did lose to South Alabama that 1 year too. That is another thing, and I'll dive into that later in the year. Of course, I want to see how Dan Mullen reacts first game, because you go back and look at his history at Mississippi State, they struggled a lot in that first game of the season. We'll see how that goes later as we'll get definitely closer to 2018. You look at the rest of the SEC East. Georgia will be picked, as I mentioned. Tennessee replacing the coach. Kentucky is Kentucky. I agree. He'll want to run that score up the first game. Florida's better than Kentucky. I don't think it matters what the record is right now. We've seen things kind of happen. Maybe Florida shouldn't have won that game this past year, but it happened. For the most part, Florida's better than Kentucky. More times than not. There's a reason the streak is what it is right now. Vanderbilt, Florida's roster is better than Vanderbilt, no matter what head coach is Missouri. It's a team maybe to watch out for, but we'll see what happens with Drew Lock. They lost their offensive coordinator, who's now head coach at Central Florida, and Josh Heupel. So South Carolina, it'd probably be a Georgia pick to win the East. Florida, South Carolina will be looked at to finish second and third, along with Tennessee there. Florida, South Carolina, Tennessee. I think Jeremy Pruitt's getting a lot of rave reviews so far for how he's come in and hired staff and how he's kind of recruiting at Tennessee right now too. So we'll kind of see. You look at year one expectations. We know that's what I was trying to think of. I know somebody's asking Drew Lock back. I don't know if he's declared yet or not. I know he hasn't declared yet. So should he? With Josh Heupel leaving as offensive coordinator, that may make him give thoughts to going ahead and leaving and going ahead and testing the NFL waters. But the problem is, it is a pretty competitive quarterback heavy draft, so he may want to wait a year. Maybe if he can have another year and putting up the numbers he's put up the last 2 years, it may make his stock rise a little bit more. So he probably wouldn't be a top 5 quarterback going into the draft this coming up year. So maybe if he comes back, puts up some big numbers. But we'll see. Heupel leaving may just make it where we'll see. I don't know if Missouri's made an offensive coordinator hire yet either, so I don't know if it would be a similar system or not. It would benefit them if it was, and you could keep Lock another year going about that. So, I don't know where the media will go when it comes around to picking second in the SEC East next year. It will be with Georgia, of course, being picked to win it. But with the way Missouri finished out the season, Florida with Dan Mullen, you would have to think the media is kind of going to eat that up and saying how Florida will be much improved. Tennessee with a new coach, and Kentucky, South Carolina, all those teams. Somebody saying no interview for Missouri next week. Offensive coordinator there. So, and you got LSU and Mississippi State out of the West next year for the Gators. So, Dan Mullen's first year, guess what? He's got to go back to Starkville as Gators head coach. So, that's going to be an interesting storyline that week of Dan Mullen's first year as head coach at Florida. So, off the top of my head, record, man, I don't know. It's kind of tough. Tyler's saying 8.5 should be over or under. I'll probably agree with that. 8.5. So could you see Florida going 9-3 or 8-4? Marcel Harris eligible for another year. Injury. I think he's eligible for another year, so we'll see what he does. He was close to declaring last year for the NFL draft, but decided to come back. So I don't know what he'll do with the injury. But going back to the record, 9-3, 8-4. If you just off the top of my head say for sure, well, not maybe for sure losses, but games that where you would probably say Florida's going to be the underdog in. Maybe underdogs at Tennessee. I'd probably pick Florida to win that game though. Georgia, FSU for sure they'll be underdogs in going to Tallahassee as it stands right now. I don't know how the season will play out, but as it stands right now, if Vegas was to pick it, FSU would be favored. So that's 2 losses there. You would have to say there's LSU they would be probably underdogs at home to LSU as it would stand right now. So that's 3 games. 4 games if you count Tennessee. At Tennessee, they would probably be underdogs in right now too. So that's 8-4 right now with games that would either be toss-ups or the games they would be underdogs in. Probably underdogs at Mississippi State too. Yeah, you're right, Terrence. So that's 5 there where you can point to saying they would at least the Tennessee game it could be a pick 'em. South Carolina, that's what I'm saying. South Carolina's at home is another pick 'em. So you're looking at probably half the schedule where Florida would be underdogs or pick 'ems. Hopefully in Dan Mullen's first year you don't lose all those games and you're 6-6. So I'd say I'd ideally 9-3, realistic 8-4, maybe. So we'll kind of see how that goes. look, one reason Mississippi State has one reason you might put them as underdogs against Mississippi State would be because of what Dan Mullen built them up to be. And Dan Mullen's not going to be there. So we'll see how that goes. That was kind of a look back at 2017, a little bit of a look ahead to 2018. Best friend Josh jumps in, 8-4 for Florida next year. Like I said, that's probably where I'd put them at too. What are the 4 losses? I'll say Georgia. I still can't pick Florida to beat FSU just yet. Not just yet. Do I want to? Of course I do. LSU's a better team right now till we see whatever we see from them. But that Florida LSU game, look, it's Florida LSU is always a tough game. It's always a flip of the coin type of game. Just because right now it looks like Florida's the worst team, doesn't mean they'll lose. But there's 3 games I think you can point to. At Starkville is going to be tough too. There's going to be some emotions running high for Dan Mullen going into that game. Early in the season, if the offensive kinks aren't worked out, you got to go to Tennessee. That's going to be a tough game as well. Kentucky's always in recent history been a tough game for Florida. 2 years ago was a blowout, of course, at home in the Swamp. Luke Del Weir went off, but besides that, those games against Kentucky have been pretty close as well. Year one under Dan Mullen, it's kind of hard to get a gauge on, but I could definitely see no better than 9-3. That would be really, really, really tough to see better than 9-3. I think 8-4 is probably more realistic. Georgia, FSU, LSU, that's 3 losses there. So that's what I'm saying. I can point to probably 3 losses. Picking a 4th loss is kind of tough, but when you go against South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, LSU, Mississippi State, there we go. I think, and I see somebody saying, flip the record, that'll be progress. Probably so. You look at 7-5 would be kind of hard to swallow, but if it's 7-5 and maybe hitting around the Georgia game on, you start seeing the offense kind of take off. Fans would probably take that if the offense looks pretty good toward the end of the year. 7-5 would be kind of a tough pill to swallow if the offense is still kind of struggling a little bit. But if you're playing with a true freshman quarterback and Emory Jones, then look. You start seeing progress about halfway through the season throughout, and there's something to point to. Then you can get excited, maybe even with 5 losses. But 8-4 in offensive progress, then you're looking for a big 2019 with an experienced team coming back there. So we'll kind of see offensive line, as somebody else just said, offensive line play will be key, and how far and what Florida's going to move forward with their different strength and conditioning. That hopefully it will be better. But look, it's a new horizon, new things for 2018. Looking back at 2017, yes, I know it wasn't pretty, but going back and looking at it, it's kind of what you do toward the end of the year. New Year's resolution, of course. Hey, just be a better team. Absolutely, that's what Florida fans hope for. That's what we want to see. Yeah, absolutely. 9-3 is definitely attainable. Like I said, schedule does set up nicely, but we'll see how it goes. But guys and girls out there, thanks for everything and you've done for 2017. It's been a big year for Gators Breakdown. I never imagined it would be growing into one of the most popular Gator podcast stuff out there. Big thanks to Bill and Will for joining me and helping it grow. I can't thank those guys enough. It is look, we don't get paid for this. This thing has been for fun. Yes, we had that little run where we had a little bit of a sponsorship, but that basically just paid for all the stuff that I had to have SoundCloud hosted. So we take time away from our family, and during the season, 3 shows a week while we're all working our normal full-time 40-hour-a-week jobs, sometimes even more than that. So, all the kind words and all the interaction we have with you guys on Twitter, thanks a lot. Makes it all worth it. We look at it this way. We're going to talk Gator football anyway, so we might as well do it on a platform where we get to interact with you guys. We're going to talk football anyway. We get to go on Google Hangouts or YouTube Hangouts and have a live show. I turn it into a podcast, and you guys just eat it up, and all the thanks that come our way, and we thank you guys out there for interacting with us. It's made it a lot of fun. So, as I said, 2018, hopefully, some big things are coming. The way things are looking. So keep your ears open, keep your eyes open. We'll have some when things go. As I mentioned at the beginning of this Periscope here, as I will turn it into a Gators Breakdown Plus episode. But Will's got his readingreaction.com website. You can go and check out his articles there. And Bill Sykes. You can find him on Twitter at RealBSykes. Follow for all his analysis there. Will Miles on Twitter at Will Miles SEC. You can follow me on Twitter, host of Gators Breakdown, David Waters at GatorDave_SEC. So guys and girls out there, like I said, thanks for everything in 2017. We're looking forward to 2018, making Gators Breakdown even bigger, doing some even bigger and better things. And so, stay tuned. 2018 will be a good year for the Gators. See you later.